Hello, welcome to another First for Friday. We're going to start out today with The Ghost, The White House, and Me. I just thought that this one was kind of appropriate since it's an election year. This one is a Lexile level of 800. There's no synopsis on the back, so I'm just going to get right into it. Chapter 1, in which visitors arrive. The White House. Me, KK Granger, the daughter of the president living in the White House. Inauguration day was only 2 weeks ago, and it's still so hard to believe. But when I look around my bedroom at the wall-to-wall carpeting, walk-in closets, floor-to-ceiling windows, and outside at the acres of trees and fountains right in the middle of Washington, it begins to sink in. To tell the truth, I feel like I've moved into a museum that I'll never call home. I miss our old house with its creaky floors and whistling radiators, the big kitchen where I tried out recipes from Cookbook for Kids, and the library window seat where I could close the draperies around me and no one would know where I was or what I was doing. What I was doing was writing. I'm a secret writer. I graduated from diaries in 3rd grade to plays, and from plays to mysteries. Now that I'm in 6th grade, I'm starting a mystery set in the Rocky Mountains. I haven't worked out the whole plot yet, but I've got some ideas in the back of my head. It helps to keep what I'm doing a secret, so I don't feel any pressure to hurry up and finish the way I do with homework. It's hard to keep everything a secret around here. Everyone, especially my Secret Service agent, Tom, knows where I am from morning till night. And today, my sister Annie and I are having a perfectly good Saturday ruined. I was going to work on my mystery, and Annie wanted to go ice skating with a friend. But President Donald Williamson, ex-President Williamson, and Mrs. Williamson are coming to the White House for lunch with Mom and Dad. And they're bringing Borden, their know-it-all grandson. Mom told Annie and me that we have to entertain Borden. Borden Williamson, who goes to Ward Driscoll School, like Annie and me, is the smartest kid in my class, maybe in the whole school. But he's a big talker and he doesn't let anyone forget it. Actually, I can't think of anything that Borden Williamson could say or do that I'd care about. I groan. Some morning this is going to be, and not just boring. Borden S. Williamson's hanging around for lunch, too. Annie is polishing off a cranberry muffin left over from breakfast. The S probably stands for stuffy. Annie's 2 years younger than me, but I have to admit she's smarter. And always ready with a comeback. I'm usually the wordsmith, but I can't think of anything insulting starting with S except stupid or silly or spacey, and Borden isn't any of those. I could have been ice skating right now. Annie twirls, spins, and dips as if that's the way she skates, which isn't. I don't see why I have to do this anyway. Borden's your friend, not mine. I snort. My friend? Oh yeah, I forgot. Borden and I are best friends. Annie finishes her muffin and wipes her mouth with the back of her hand. You said it, not me. It's time to head out. Before Mom went down to the state floor to pick up the Williamsons, she told Annie and me to be waiting by the elevator in exactly 15 minutes or else. Annie and I never argue with Mom's or else. But I hate to turn off my computer. I click sleep. There, at least my mystery can doze until I get back. The elevator's a good hike down the family floor hall from our bedroom. The hall doesn't have a single chair or sofa to curl up in. It's like a museum loaded with antiques, paintings, knickknacks, chandeliers, and flowers. The family floor is usually crowded with Secret Service, maids, flower arrangers, repairmen, and I don't know who else running around. But for some reason, everything's quiet today, and even our footsteps on the new-smelling carpet are new. Annie and I are almost at the elevator when Dad comes hurrying after us. I'm coming! That's Dad, always late. Dad runs his hand over his head to pat down what hair he has left. I was supposed to be downstairs welcoming the Williamsons. Don't either of you tell your mother I was watching golf and forgot the time. How much? Annie's big on picking up spare change. Oh, so now you're into blackmail? Dad puts a mock horrified expression. That depends on how much you'll give me for not spilling the beans about you two spying on our dinner party last night. I'm sure to be the villain if Mom finds out Annie and I were sneaking around. Well, why don't you two call it even? Fine with me. Dad straightens his tie and smiles. I hear the Williamson's grandson is coming. Is that Borden, the king of Bordens? Annie and I laugh. Dad is short and pudgy with a great smile. He can always get Annie and me to laugh, even if we're not in a laughing mood, like now. When I was 3, he was such a perfect Santa Claus, I got confused that maybe he was the real Santa Claus. Dad looks on the upside of everything, which makes him a soft touch for almost anything Annie and I want to do. He's like our own personal Santa Claus. Okay, so that's the first four of The Ghost, the White House, and Me. The next one is Walk Across the Sea. This one, there's not a synopsis, but there kind of is. In the late 1800s, in California, 15-year-old Eliza doesn't understand why the Chinese immigrants are being treated so unfairly. After a Chinese boy helps her and rescues her goat, Parthenia, Eliza questions the townspeople's beliefs and helps Wachu. Lexile level of 600. Okay, Chapter 1, Parting Waters. To come to our home in the lighthouse, we had to walk across the bottom of the sea. Sometimes I felt like Moses when he parted the Red Sea to escape from Pharaoh's army, excepting these waters didn't make a wall on either side like in the Bible, just regular workday waves, and there were no Egyptians or chariots anywhere about. Still, there was a parting of waters. Twice a day, at ebb tide, the ocean rolled back to uncover a rocky isthmus between the mainland and our island, sea bottom. We had to pick our way midst boulders and heaps of driftwood, mist tide pools and gurgling streams. I'd lift my skirts to keep them dry, but there was nothing to be done about my shoes. So Papa bought me boots, tall, black, over-the-shoe boots made of India rubber. I loved to peer at the sea creatures, so curious, bared to the light, starfish clutching like bright orange hands to the rocks, sea urchins bristling with purple spines, hermit crabs scabbing about in their stolen seashell caps. Seemed like I was looking beyond the surface of the things into a secret part of creation, an enchanted place. And to me, it was enchanted. It was a paradise for a while. Not just the walk across the seafloor, but everything about the place. The brown pelicans that sailed like schooners past our windows, the spouting whales, the lantern room at night where the beacon sent slivers of rainbows shivering across my body, where I could close my eyes and feel the light as it passed, warming me all the way through. You would have loved it there, Andrew John. I'm sorry you can't grow up there. It's my fault. But I don't regret it. Not for me. For your sake, though, I'm sorry. March 1886, Crescent City, California. The China Boy. The beginning of the end of our life in the lighthouse was the day the goat got loose. Well, there were many such days. Papa had bought her, Parthenia, to crop the poison oak and blackberry bushes that threatened to take over our island. The milk was an extra blessing. Parthenia did her job too well. When she had taken her fill of brambles, she commenced upon Mama's vegetables and roses. Mama gave roses the go-by in time, but Papa built fence after fence for the garden before he finally set up one the goat looked upon as a discouragement. After that, she raided other folks' gardens. She would escape the island at ebb tide, and afterward we would hear reports. Mrs. Summersby at church, fuming about her hollyhocks. Horace Arons at school, giving an account of his mother's lost cabbages. Dr. Wilton from the hospital, lamenting his nasturtiums. Dr. Wilton was good-hearted about it, though. He said Parthenia went tripping through the tiny clapboard hospital, entertaining the patients. The whole place felt jollier when she was there. But Papa said it was not right to let Parthenia run loose. Besides, he said, the heathen Chinamen in the shanties at the edge of town were known to eat all manner of meat. Raw meat, crow meat, cat meat, dog meat. They likely took a look upon Parthenia as a tasty supper indeed. Still, the cantankerous goat would escape. She could gnaw through any rope. She could jump atop her shed and vault across the fence. She could lean against the slats and knock them flat. If she purely wanted out, we couldn't hold her. Just slow her down. It was my job to find her and fetch her home before the tide came in. This day I'm telling of was a Saturday early in March, 2 years ago when I was 13. Parthenia had tucked into Mrs. Overmeyer's primroses, and that lady was none too pleased. Eliza Jane McCauley, she said when I came upon the scene, you get that goat out of my garden. Do you hear me? Shoo, goat, shoo! Oh, my primroses, my poor, poor primroses. It took some doing to cultivate primroses so near the Pacific Ocean. With the constant salty wind and the sandy soil, primroses and other flowers were a luxury and purely cherished by folks who grew them. I tied a rope around Parthenia's neck and we played tug-of-war for a spell until she clapped eyes on the violets by the hospital and made a beeline in that direction. I managed to steer her away toward the bluff above the isthmus. Folks get contentious with you laying into their flowers, I told her. Haven't you noticed? Haven't you wondered why all the conniptions were about you? Parthenia bleated mournfully. She looked back at me with great, round, sorrowful eyes. She was misunderstood, she seemed to say. She was only hungry. I first caught sight of Wah Chung when we reached the edge of the bluff. I didn't know yet he was called Wah Chung. I didn't know a blessed thing about him, save that he was squatting beside some rocks on the path to our island, his long pigtail hanging down the back beneath a wide, flat straw hat. A Chinaman. Seemed like he was writing something, or drawing, maybe. I stood there a tick, not knowing what to do. I was forbidden to mill about the China shanties, as some children did, buying lychee and nuts and ginger candies. Heathen things, Papa called them. So I stayed away. I was forbidden to even speak to a Chinaman. If you see one coming toward you, Papa said, step away and don't look at him. If you meet their eyes, they might try to converse with you. Best have nothing to do with them. But the tide was on the uprise that afternoon. It had already swallowed up most of the isthmus, and thin, foamy edges of waves washed across the narrow way that remained. I couldn't get home without passing quite near to the Chinaman, and I dared not wait for him to leave. If it hadn't been for Parthenia, I might have turned back. The Wiltons let me stay with them whenever it was needful, when I became stranded on the mainland unexpectedly, or when, because of the tides, I had to leave for school early or turn homeward late. Mrs. Wilton had devised a signal to show that if I was safely settled at their house, a yellow banner hung above their front porch and visible from the island. But the invitation did not include Parthenia. And besides, I didn't hanker for more doings with gardeners on a rampage. So that is A Walk Across the Sea. The next one is one of my favorite books from elementary school, Number the Stars. It's a pretty quick read. It's a Lexile 670. 10-year-old Anne-Marie Johansson, Anne-Marie Johansson and her best friend Ellen Rosen often think about life before the war. But it's now 1943, and their life in Copenhagen is filled with school, food shortages, and the Nazi soldiers marching in their town. The Nazis won't stop. The Jews of Denmark are being relocated, so Ellen moves in with the Johanssons and pretends to be part of the family. Then Anne-Marie is asked to go on a dangerous mission. Somehow she must find the strength and courage to save her best friend's life. There's no turning back now. How far would you guys go to help your best friend? Chapter 1. Why are you running? I'll race you to the corner, Ellen. Anne-Marie adjusted the thick leather pack on her back so that her school books balanced evenly. Ready? She looked at her best friend. Ellen made a face. No, she said, laughing. You know I can't beat you. My legs aren't as long. Can't we just walk like civilized people? She was a stocky 10-year-old, unlike lanky Anne-Marie. We have to practice for the athletic meet on Friday. I know I'm going to win the girls' race this week. I was second last week, but I've been practicing every day. Come on, Ellen, Anne-Marie pleaded, eyeing the distance to the next corner of Copenhagen Street. Please. Ellen hesitated, then nodded and shifted her own rucksack of books against her shoulders. Oh, all right. Ready? She said. Go! Shouted Anne-Marie, and the two girls were off, racing along the residential sidewalk. Anne-Marie's silvery blonde hair flew behind her, and Ellen's dark pigtails bounced against her shoulders. Wait for me! Wailed little Kirsty, left behind, but the two older girls weren't listening. Anne-Marie outdistanced her friend quickly, even though one of her shoes came untied, and she sped along the street called Osterbrogade, past the small shops and cafes of her neighborhood here in northeast Copenhagen. Laughing, she skirted an elderly lady in black who carried a shopping bag made of string. A young woman pushing a baby in a carriage moved aside to make way. The corner was just ahead. Anne-Marie looked up, panting just as she reached the corner. Her laughter stopped. Her heart seemed to skip a beat. Halt! A soldier ordered in a stern voice. The German word was familiar, as it was frightening. Anne-Marie had heard it often enough before, but it had never been directed at her until now. Behind her, Ellen also slowed and stopped. Far back, little Kirsty was plodding along, her face in a pout because the girls hadn't waited for her. Anne-Marie stared up. There were 2 of them. That meant 2 helmets, 2 sets of cold eyes glaring at her, and 4 tall, shiny boots planted firmly on the sidewalk, blocking her path to home. And it meant 2 rifles, gripped in the hands of the soldiers. She stared at the rifles first. Then, finally, she looked into the face of the soldier who had ordered her to halt. "Why are you running?" the harsh voice asked. His Danish was very poor. 3 years, Anne-Marie thought with contempt. 3 years they've been in our country and they still can't speak our language. "I was racing with my friend," she answered politely. "We have races at school every Friday and I want to do well, so I—" Her voice trailed away and the sentence unfinished. "Don't talk so much," she told herself. "Just answer them, that's all." She glanced back. Ellen was motionless on the sidewalk, a few yards behind her. Farther back, Kirsty was still sulking and walking slowly toward the corner. Nearby, a woman had come to the doorway of the shop and was standing silently, watching. One of the soldiers, the taller one, moved toward her. Anne-Marie recognized him as the one Ellen always called, in whispers, the giraffe, because of his height and the long neck that extended from his stiff collar. He and his partner were always on this corner. He prodded the corner of her backpack with the stock of his rifle. Anne-Marie trembled. "What is in here?" he asked loudly. From the corner of her eye, she saw the shopkeeper move quietly back into the shadows of the doorway, out of sight. "School books," she answered truthfully. "Are you a good student?" the soldier asked. He seemed to be sneering. "Yes." "What is your name?" "Anne-Marie Johansson." "Your friend, is she a good student too?" He was looking beyond her at Ellen, who hadn't moved. Anne-Marie looked back too and saw that Ellen's face, usually rosy-cheeked, was pale and her dark eyes wide. She nodded at the soldier. "Better than me," she said. "What is her name?" "Ellen." "And who is this?" he asked, looking to Anne-Marie's side. Kirsty had appeared there suddenly, scowling at everyone. "My little sister." She reached down for Kirsty's hand, but Kirsty, always stubborn, refused it and put her hands on her hips defiantly. The soldier reached down and stroked her little sister's short, tangled curls. "Stand still, Kirsty," Anne-Marie ordered silently, praying that somehow the obstinate 5-year-old would receive the message. But Kirsty reached up and pushed the soldier's hand away. "Don't!" she said loudly. Both soldiers began to laugh. They spoke to each other in rapid German that Anne-Marie couldn't understand. "She is pretty, like my own little girl," the tall one said in a more pleasant voice. Anne-Marie tried to smile politely. "Go home, all of you. Go study your school books and don't run. You look like hoodlums when you run." So that is Number the Stars. I really like those historical fiction books. It's an awesome genre. The last one is The Castle in the Attic. William has just received the best present of his life. It's an old, real-looking stone and wooden model of a castle with a drawbridge, a moat, and a finger-high knight to guard the gates. It's the mysterious castle his housekeeper has told him about. And even though William is sad that she is leaving, now the castle is his. William can't wait to play with the castle. He's certain there's something magical about it. And sure enough, when he picks up the tiny silver knight, it comes alive in his hand. Sir Simon tells William that a mighty story of wild sorcery, wizards, and magic. And suddenly, William is off on a fantastic quest to another land and another time where a fiery dragon and an evil wizard are waiting to do battle. It's kind of similar to Indian in the Cupboard, and it has a map. Chapter 1. On Monday afternoon, Mrs. Phillips was waiting for William at the kitchen door. He came in shaking like a dog and blowing the raindrops off the tip of his nose. "I still can't do it," he said. She looked disappointed. "What do you mean?" "He's added an Arabian dive roll at the end of my floor routine. Before I even get through the handsprings, my legs feel like jelly." "I'll just have to help you practice some more." She turned back to the sink. "Lots of work to do. We don't have that much more time." "The meet is still 6 weeks away," he said as he hung his dripping poncho on the hook by the door. "Sit down, William. There's something I have to tell you." Her voice was formal, distant. He sat on a stool and wiped off his face with the towel she handed him. "I'm going to be leaving the end of this month." "For vacation?" "No. For good. I'm moving back to England to live with my brother. Why? It might seem silly to you, but I'm homesick. Even after all these years, you're getting old enough to take care of yourself. Mrs. Phillips had been with William's family since he was born. 10 years. I thought you were going to stay until I grew up, he said, still turning the idea around in his mind. He couldn't seem to absorb it. She sat down across the table from him. Look at me. He shook his head. If he had looked at her, he might start crying. William, you're 10 years old. You can take care of yourself now. How do you know? He shouted. He shoved his chair away from the table. You're not going to leave me. I won't let you. He ran out of the room before she could say anything else. Mrs. Phillips owned two things that she really cared about. One was the picture of her husband, who'd been killed in World War II, and the other was her mother's pearl circle pin. When she went home to her little apartment in town on weekends, she left these two objects at William's house, where she thought they'd be safer. When I die, William, she often said, be sure they bury me with my picture and my pin. On Saturday morning, William took them and hid them in the shoebox that held his rock collection. He knew Mrs. Phillips would never leave without them. She must have noticed they were gone right away, because the first thing she did on Monday morning was open her top bureau drawer and take them out. When she picked him up from gymnastics practice that afternoon, she looked at him for a long time without saying anything. He got all ready to lie, but she didn't bring up the subject. On Tuesday, his father and Mrs. Phillips stopped talking the moment he walked into the kitchen. Hello, William said brightly. Mrs. Phillips turned away without a word. Hello, William. Finished your homework? His father asked as he drifted out of the room. His mother was the first one to come out and ask him directly. She was tucking him into bed Wednesday night when she brought it up. Have you seen Mrs. Phillips' picture? You know, the one of her husband that's always on her bureau? It's missing. No, William said. He put his bear over his face. Well, will you please keep an eye out for it? She's also missing a pearl pin that was left to her in her mother's will. Maybe the man who has come to fix the furnace last week took it. His mother rambled on, but William wasn't listening. Why didn't Mrs. Phillips come and ask him herself? I wish she weren't leaving, William said in the middle of one of his mother's sentences. How come she has to go? She misses England, William. That's where her brother lives. When you get older, I guess you want to go back to your family. But we're her family, aren't we? William asked. As close as we can be, William, without sharing the blood, his mother said. She's been with us for 10 years. That's a long time. She leaned over and hugged him. Good night. I'll see you in the morning. Mom, he called as she started out of the room. She won't leave without her picture, will she? She told me she wanted to be buried with it. His mother stopped and thought for a minute. She's made up her mind to go, William. I think she'd even leave her picture behind if she had to. On Friday afternoon, when William got home from school, he tiptoed into Mrs. Phillips' room and put the picture and the pin back on her bureau. When he turned around, she was standing in the doorway. Neither one of them spoke for a long time. I thought it would make you stay, he said at last. That's what I thought you thought, she said, putting out her arms. William went and buried his nose in her newly washed dress. He cried a little. She pushed the dark hair off his forehead, swaying back and forth as she hugged him. William held back his tears with his parents, with the boys at school, and even with Jason, his best friend, but never with her. You have a gentle heart, she once told him, as if that were a good enough reason for a 10-year-old boy to cry. He pulled away and blew his nose with the linen handkerchief she handed him from her pocket. I'm not giving up. I'll think of something else to keep you here, he said. Good, she answered, laughing. I like my men to fight over me. But I've got a few weapons of my own. When you come home from school on Monday, I'll have a surprise for you. What kind of surprise? He said. A big one. And I'm not going to say one more word about it. So that is the end of Castle in the Attic. So hopefully you found one you can add to your list of books that you want to read one day.